Are you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 805, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening. Welcome to Leadership Live at 805. I'm your host, Andrew Frazier, and excited to be here once again, where we're going to be talking small business. Each week, I always love having a special guest on and really talking about key things that you as an entrepreneur or business owner need to know to build your business and make it more successful. This week, our topic is a man on the mission, and our guest is Mike Steadman. And really, as an entrepreneur or a business owner, you really have to be on a mission. If you're just doing it to do something, or if you're just doing it rather than having a job, that's not enough. Because as an entrepreneur or business owner, you're going to have to work harder than you will for a job. And it's going to take you longer. You're going to make less for a while, most likely. So you have to have more than just wanting to do it. You have to be on a mission. You have to be passionate. There's so many things that you have to overcome and challenges. And our guest, Mike Steadman, he's really started from the beginning and really fought his way through to be a successful entrepreneur, business owner. But not only that, he's had his business, but he's also done things for others. And we're going to learn about IRONBOUND Boxing and how he's not just an entrepreneur with his business, but really impacting the lives of young people, as well as impacting the lives of other entrepreneurs and business owners based on what he's been learning through the process. So excited to have Mike Steadman, man on a mission, and we're really going to talk a little bit about some key things that it takes to be a successful entrepreneur and business owner. And he's really doing some great things, and we'll have some great insight. So, Mike, welcome to Leadership Live at 805. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to be here. Excuse me. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Definitely we've known each other for several years. I remember meeting you early on in the process and seeing how you've developed and grown. And, from more of a Newark focus to really expanding statewide, regionally, nationally, and even a little bit international scope. So, that's not an easy thing to do, and many people never achieve that. So, definitely want to talk a little bit about sort of how you were able to do that. One key thing that I've really liked about what you've done is, you have the work ethic, you do the work, and you are continually learning, continually developing. A lot of times I tell people, the only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. So, definitely as a business owner, there's a big component of actually doing the work. So why don't you take a minute, just tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you got where you are, and, actually where you are and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd just like to say good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. Andrew Frazier is a great friend. He's a great mentor. And he's one of the first people I talked to when I started my entrepreneurial journey back in 2017. Again, my name is Mike Steadman. I actually go by Iron Mike Steadman these days. I tell people that if you went through the pandemic in Newark, New Jersey, your name would be Iron as well. And it's actually not Newark, it's Newark. Rocking a hat here from one of my young entrepreneurs. But I'm originally from College Station, Texas. Had the opportunity to go to United States Naval Academy. Was a 3-time national boxing champion, 2-time most valuable boxer, captain of my boxing team. Just fell in love with the sport. Once I graduated at the Naval Academy, I served our country as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, deployed to Afghanistan, Japan, and the Philippines. And in 2015, when I relocated off of active duty, I decided to relocate to Newark, New Jersey, because I wanted to start an inner city boxing program that taught kids how to be champions in and out of the ring. I joke with people that, you don't win 3 national championships boxing a bunch of midshipmen. I learned boxing in inner city gyms in Baltimore, DC, Brooklyn. And there weren't too many people at the Naval Academy that looked like me. There sure were a lot inside these inner city boxing gyms. And I felt like that was a broken system because, I would talk to a lot of young men and women inside these amazing amateur boxing programs running on shoestring budgets. And many of them felt like their only option was to turn pro or go to the streets. And I was like, we got to create a better way. I wanted more boxers like me and my teammates from the Naval Academy, where at the end of the day, we'd graduate college, serve our country in the military as officers, and then get out and start our own businesses, work in corporate America, just really have these amazing opportunities, become doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, etc. So how do I bring that to the inner city? So I took that idea in the back of my head. And when I transitioned off active duty, I moved to Newark and accepted a job at St. Benedict's Preparatory School in downtown Newark. I'm working with young men of color as a residence housing director. And while I did that, I ended up launching a free boxing gym in Newark called the IRONBOUND Boxing Academy, and launched a nonprofit to build that up. And when I contacted Andrew back in 2018, it was actually 2018, I think, I was looking at a way to essentially work on IRONBOUND full time. And I left my job at St. Benedict's after 3 years in 2018, the summer of 2018, and stepped out into the world of entrepreneurship, trying to stand up a for-profit model. I jumped out the airplane with no parachute, just built it on the way down. Initially, I started coaching boxing to companies in the New York City metro area as a form of employee wellness. While I was falling out of the airplane, I also landed on a consulting contract with an organization called WeWork that many of you know, and became a consultant around veteran entrepreneurship. And doing that, I kind of just built up my reputation, a lot of visibility on IRONBOUND and some of the work I was doing in the inner city, while at the same time supporting the veteran entrepreneurial community, basically lifting as I climbed. So anything I knew, any knowledge and insight I found out, I was pouring it into the veteran community, and I just started helping people. And that's really what it comes down to, is just started helping people. And over the time since we've started, my nonprofit here in Newark has gained some national attention. I've gained a little bit of national attention, being out there and carrying the IRONBOUND flag, but also just growing as an entrepreneur and being able to support entrepreneurs, particularly in the veteran ecosystem and marginalized groups such as Black and Brown people in Newark. I do it on a couple of different platforms. Mainly, I do podcasting. I think me and Andrew, I was doing a show called Lift As We Climb, just something I had launched on my own before I knew anything about media or digital media or anything. I was just playing around with shows. But in my entrepreneurial journey, one thing that always bothered me was that I would read a lot of business literature, and there weren't too many people that looked like me in the business literature either. And I started going down that rabbit hole and starting to figure out why. Found out some of the social and racial bias within the publishing industry, and realized that podcasts could be a great medium for us as people of color to deliver business education, flex our business acumen beyond just the come up story, but in a sense, teaching the way we approach business, teaching marketing and branding and all these different mediums, similar to Andrew's book, Small Business Like a Pro. And came with a new business model in the middle of COVID, producing podcasts for brands, particularly brands interested in thought leadership around entrepreneurship to marginalized groups, and launched IRONBOUND Media. And I've been off to the races ever since. And I've just come recently to describe myself as a modern day Renaissance man, do a little podcasting, coach boxing. I'm really passionate about, teaching entrepreneurship to marginalized groups. And I'm a writer. So I do all those things. I make it work. And I'm just growing, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to share all the knowledge and insights I've gained over my entrepreneurial journey these past few years.
Okay, great. Thanks for that background. Definitely, you've done a lot of great things, and even some things that I didn't even know you sharing. So definitely, we share military experience, which is a great experience, and you learn a lot of valuable stuff. But really taking what you learn there and sharing it with others is huge, and also sharing entrepreneurship with veterans is big as well. So when you had your business, what was one of the biggest challenges you had early on?
Buy-in from clients. I think we have this feeling that like somebody's going to save us. Mm-hmm. Like even with my nonprofit, right? I've been in the media, freaking television, national television, you name it. And it wasn't until like a year and a half when I was like, you know what? This actually doesn't really build the business. It's good leveraging in terms of like credibility, see you in the space, whatever. But there's still this behind the scenes stuff that really makes things work. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of get caught up in the hype, like you carry the brand flag, you tell everybody how amazing your business is and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't really necessarily deliver value. It's like good value for a little bit. And so, when I launched my for-profit, and you told me this, Andrew, matter of fact, you were like, hey, make sure you cover the bills, make sure you cover the expenses. Now, I'm a person of faith. I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe the universe put in good energy and the universe pushes out good energy. But, when I was starting off, man, my cash flow was really covered by my consulting engagement. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And I felt guilty about that for a little bit of like, am I really an entrepreneur? End up getting this consulting contract, with a big brand. But once I got past that, all that other stuff, right, I realized like that's kind of what it is. And I think too often we as entrepreneurs, especially those of us of color that come from backgrounds where we may or may not have a lot of, capital to invest in a business and burn through cash, et cetera, you got to figure out how to cover that cash flow some way. And so the dream of entrepreneurship that I think a lot of people are being sold is not in line with the more reality of it. And so, understanding, how to sell and go and get clients, et cetera. And so when I launched my podcast agency, I did that more of a pull. I saw an opportunity in the marketplace. I was trained up a little bit, had a business coach. And so I was profitable right from the gate. And one of the things I did, though, was I validated the business model. And I think, people have great ideas, but until somebody's willing to exchange, value for that idea in the form of a monetary compensation or a donation, if you're a nonprofit, then you could be setting yourself up for failure or a lot more pain, and learning to go right after validating the business model and then launching from there, getting a little credibility. I had a softer landing when I transitioned into podcasting. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely, focusing on making sure you're making money is important. And, even if you're going to do a nonprofit, you got to focus on bringing enough money in to make that nonprofit work. And it's not as easy as it seems. So definitely, you've had a chance to do that. You've done a lot of great things. But what I want to dig into and what we're going to dig into is, you've pivoted several times and, figured out how to move your business forward. And want to talk a little bit about how do you know when to pivot? How do you choose how to pivot? And, once you've pivoted, how do you implement where you're going successfully? So we're gonna talk some about that. But first, we're going to take a minute to share a little bit about the Small Business Pro University, which we produced this show through. So we'll take a quick prelude, see a quick video about the university, and then we'll come back with Mike Steadman and really talk about pivoting your business and how he's pivoted his. So we'll be back in a second.
Do you own your business or does it own you? Is your business growing and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I created the Small Business Pro University for you. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program, or just simply choose the courses that you need. At www.sbprou.com, we will empower you to thrive and not just survive, and make more money in any business environment.
Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. It's Andrew Frazier with Mike Steadman, and we're going to talk about a man on a mission. And part of your mission is figuring out how to move your business forward. And especially with COVID and these challenging times, you have to even be more focused on running your business successfully, running it more efficiently, more professionally, but also being able to be creative, be flexible, and really move your business in the right direction based on what's happening in the marketplace. So, Mike, you talked about your business pivoting several times. Let's talk about, initially you pivoted from just the nonprofit to the consulting, and what made you do that, and how did you do that?
I mean, to be quite frank, the consulting kind of fell into my lap, but I didn't know that this was a thing until later. But, I think one of the things is don't be afraid to work for free sometimes, because I think that allows you to build some knowledge and some expertise in a way and prove that you can deliver value. And so, I ended up connecting with an organization called Bunker Labs, which is a national nonprofit that promotes veteran entrepreneurship to veterans and military spouses. And so they got chapters all over the country. They're doing some great stuff. And I got connected with them out in New York City after one of my entrepreneur programs at Stanford University. I did a 4-week program out there too. And I ended up being a volunteer for Bunker Labs in New York City, right at the time they were launching their Veterans and Residents program. And so I basically, was a volunteer for 6 months in New York City carrying the Bunker Labs flag. That's kind of how I got a lot of PR for IRONBOUND, because, I would sit down and hold interviews for Bunker Labs, tell them about all the amazing entrepreneurs we're supporting. And then someone asked, the interview would always ask me, well, what's your venture? And I'm like, I run a free boxing gym in Newark, New Jersey for youth and young adults called the IRONBOUND Boxing Academy. And they're like, wait, what? And then they would say, can you show us your gym? And I'll pull out my phone and show them a picture or a video, and they would absolutely be blown away. And then the next thing was they had to come film in my gym. And so basically that's what happened. I would do an interview for a veteran organization, whether it's Bunker Labs or something else. Then people would want to come and see my gym. And I did a really good job when I was volunteering for Bunker Labs. That got the attention of WeWork. And WeWork basically had an opening because they were trying to fill a veteran role to consult around to lead the Veterans and Residents program. And so me, being seen in New York City just by coincidence, they approached me about doing a consulting contract. After I left my full-time job, because they found out I had left my job for some IRONBOUND, and I turned it down. And I said, okay, you know what? I'll do it. And so I did that for a year, and I just kind of learned my chops. Was able to learn from a lot of other entrepreneurs that I was supporting while simultaneously building out my employee wellness program. And eventually what happened was I was able to leave the WeWork contract. I had enough revenue coming in from the corporate boxing, and I was off to the races, and the nonprofit was doing all right. And then in the process of that, I won a grant too from the Street Shares Foundation and Mark Rockefeller for $25K. So I just kind of figured out how to stay alive. Certain people, go to a good school. They might not necessarily get all A's, but they know how to pass their classes. That was really me, my first 2 years in entrepreneurial hustle. And then I really got tested when COVID hit, and my revenue fell to zero on my for-profit. My gym closed on my nonprofit, and I was in a pretty low place because it's I felt so helpless, and I felt like all the work I had put the previous years to get my for-profit entity off the ground. We're making, $7,500 a month coming in on revenue teaching boxing. Nothing to, it's not a major corporation, but not bad for a little lifestyle business. And that took me for a couple of years to get up to that. And then all of a sudden I had it fall to zero. And so having to deal with the reality of that, picking myself up off the ground and launching a new business, pivoting to virtual actually, but having a wherewithal to think of a new business model, executing on that. And then, I'll tell you, we also launched an incubator program on a nonprofit while our gym was closed called Thrive, teaching entrepreneurship to young men and women of color here in Newark, and giving them micro grants between $500 and $2,000. So in the process of teaching entrepreneurship to young people, in the process of launching a new business model, which I came up with that business model while teaching Thrive and used it as an example, as a use case, it just really increased my confidence. And I was like, okay, I don't have all the answers figured out, but I think I'm pretty good at bootstrapping. Like if I was at, say, my specialties, bootstrapping, social impact, right? And then definitely like branding. Okay,
cool. So you hit on a few key things that I want to talk a little bit more about. And one of the things is relationships. I mean, at the end of the day, relationships are one of the most valuable things that you have. And, it's the key to being able to market and sell effectively. And so many business owners, have challenges building relationships or have fear of going out and meeting new people and connecting with new people. But given your business, you never would have had the opportunity had you not connected with people. And sometimes you have to build a relationship and provide value before they hire you. So talk about your relationship strategy, how you connect with relationships, build with relationships, continue to maintain relationships that have helped you be successful in business.
I think when I first started, I was just very pure. I still am very pure, right? I was just hungry, trying to help kids in Newark, was really excited for the opportunity to lead the veteran residence cohort in New York City. And so I just kind of poured my heart into it. And I got recognized and people saw it. They saw that I was good in front of the camera. They saw how, how much I put into the program and got out of it. And I saw my results. And, it just kind of created this kind of trust. Because I think relationships are also how people talk about you when you're not in the room. But one of the things I learned, and I didn't really learn it more until COVID, was that I was always very hesitant of selling. I hated selling. Selling was just, right? It's always that awkward conversation. But one of the things I learned about business, and this is really a testament to, my business coach, Bill Watkins from the Lions Pride, that at the end of the day, business is just helping people. It's really just helping people. Relationships are about helping people. You don't have to, not being transactional, not expecting any return, just helping people because, it's the right thing to do. And when people start to recognize that and you help people out and you make other people win, people remember that. And so when your name comes up or opportunities come your way, people throw it at you. And so with my go-to-market strategy, I just figured out ways to kind of help people. And I would, tell people, hey, if you're interested in launching a podcast, I can help. Cool. If I can't help you, I'll find someone who can. And that just did dividends. And then the same thing on the nonprofit front. I get hit up all the time, not even nonprofit, just being an entrepreneur. People hit me up all the time about asking me questions about this, asking me questions about that. More often than not, I'm pretty busy, but just making a little bit of time to just kind of connect with that person and send them some gems or whatever, then they're always kind of having Overwatch for you. And that's really what it is. You want to create this, pay it forward. I just pay it forward. I just help people. I try to be as authentic as I can. And that's just, compounded over time to where, I kind of got a decent reputation within my space, which is the veteran entrepreneurial space. And so, people look out for me and they look out for my kids at IRONBOUND.
Building relationships has been key. And you talked about know, like, and trust, which is really why people buy from you. And, what makes a lot of businesses successful is they have to know, like, and trust you, but they can't know you if they don't experience you. So sometimes you have to get out there and, meet people, build relationships, communicate. And, that's one thing you've done. And then you want to be memorable. How are they going to remember you? And having energy, having passion, being someone who is committed to helping others and being able to help people makes a big difference. One other thing you talked about was, you didn't feel like consulting was a business. And, I run into a lot of times, sometimes we try and do too much with our business. Consulting is a business. You're on your own. And, but a lot of times people want to manufacture and sell, and each of those could be a separate business. And I always tell people that they should focus on what they do best and most profitably. So, you've got large businesses that all they do is sell products. Insurance businesses, they just sell. A lot. So even just being able to sell effectively can be a business. A lot of manufacturers who manufacture products, if that's their specialty, a lot of times they'll have the selling, they'll distribute, sell to a distributor or another organization that takes care of the selling and logistics. So you want to find your niche and where you can add the most value and be able to focus on that. So once you came to terms with that, how did that impact the success of your business?
Well, I think when I launched the podcast agency, right, it was kind of like a combination of all the knowledge, because it's really knowledge too. I mean, that's the end of the day. People are coming to you because they trust you. But once I learned that was okay and kind of how the retainer model worked and all that kind of stuff, I just kind of had some self-awareness around, like, I think for me, as I kind of think about where I'm headed long-term, right? Like, one of the things I realized is I don't like managing people. People think I'm good at it. I'm not. There are people that do it better than me. I can do it. I was an infantry officer, but I really enjoy learning and growing and teaching and et cetera. And so podcasting gave me a medium to do that. And, one of the people, I'm just able to share my knowledge in a way that is authentic to me. And what I'll tell you is, as I continue to look towards the future, going back to what I was saying, is I've done the cultural assessments. I've done all that kind of stuff, right? I've just learned who I am and what fills me up in terms of like entrepreneurship. I really do like trying to solve kind of hard problems. I don't necessarily know if I want to manage like a giant entity of a thing, right? But I do aspire to the idea of being able to come in and just, help a target niche win the day at whatever they're doing through podcasts and through branding, and just kind of learning how to package that in a way that makes sense, because you can still productize your consulting services in a way. And I don't do consulting now. My main thing is, again, I sell podcasts, and that's what we do. We produce podcasts for brands, but it kind of, I don't know if it's almost like a new industry. It kind of blends the best of both worlds, because every time I launch a podcast, it's like launching a business, and working with the client, you're essentially their podcast coach. You're a podcast consultant. You're not just doing the work for them. You're helping them think through their go-to-market. You're helping them think through their perfect listener, their perfect customer, and thinking about how they want to leverage this platform. And so I just get fired up about it. And so one of the things I'm doing now too is create my own little IP. One of the things that came out of launching a podcast was my marketing framework, dog whistle branding. Because I tell people your podcast is like a dog whistle. You start blowing on it. Who are you trying to communicate with? And the things that work for podcasts and work just as well for broader businesses as well. And so I'm interested in, building a brand around that, playing around with, this asset that I use, or this brand I use to teach branding. But I'm just learning, I'm growing. Like I said, I describe myself as a Renaissance man. That's not a joke. It's just something I feel kind of comfortable with. And as I look towards the future, I enjoy to be able to continue to grow and learn. And I think it's interesting, Andrew, as so many of the entrepreneurs we look up to now these days, the ones that were on the cover of Forbes, that are writing books and all that kind of stuff, they step down from their companies, most of them. And you wonder why? Because one thing we don't talk about is that running an organization is a hustle. It is really hard. and the founder to be reality, sometimes he's the last one to get paid, or she's the last one to get paid, because you got to keep a healthy business. You got to keep money in the tank. You got to maintain healthy cash flow. And so, when people see these product brands and they're making millions of dollars, et cetera, remember, if you're an entrepreneur from Newark, bootstrapped, you got to sell a lot of product to be able to justify that take-home salary of, $45K a year, $100K a year. How much product are you selling then? And there's just this opportunity around delivering knowledge and value using the asset we have here. I enjoy reading. And I just think it's a great opportunity. So.
Okay. No, that's excellent. I mean, one of the things that, I think that you done extremely well, and that not a lot of people do, is, continually learn, continually, expose yourself to new ideas, new ways of thinking, different perspectives, and learning about best practices and learning from people who have done things that you want to do. And, I remember you got my copy of my book, and like 2 days later you had read the whole thing, and you had like sticky notes on like a whole bunch of pages, and, you seem to, devour knowledge. So talk a little bit about, the way you look at, learning, educating yourself, building your knowledge base, and a little bit about how you do that, because, sometimes that's daunting to a lot of people. And that's why they never even get started.
So it's funny. I was texting one of my young boxers today, a guy named Keith Cologne, Jr. And I sent him a picture of a book I was reading called Content Inc. Right. And it talks about this business model, which is an audience first business model, i.e. build your audience first, get a user base, and then sell a product later. Don't do it right away. And I was actually talking about building this other brand, which describes the persona of the boxing entrepreneur. So we're going back and forth, and I sent him that picture of the book, and he was like, "Oh man, I got to get back to reading." I was like, 10 minutes a day if you have to. But one of the things that I have found for me in this age of entrepreneurship is very stressful. Life is stressful. The world is stressful. And when I start to feel off, I'm all, uncentered, I'm not feeling strong, whatever, there's a practice that I'm doing that realigns me. And I'll notice that when I'm doing this daily practice, regardless of what's happening in the universe, I feel a lot stronger than I do when I'm not doing this practice. And what does that consist of? Like a meditation of some sort, sitting quietly, giving daily gratitude. These are the 3 things I'm thankful for. And reading every day for 20 minutes and writing every day for at least 20 minutes. Some people call it they have the miracle morning. That's one. I try to do it sometimes. I don't always hit it. But one of the things I've been focused on the last 2 weeks really hard is gratitude, reading 20 minutes, and writing 20 minutes. And what I found is, and I think it's easy for us as people of color to experience imposter syndrome, and I know I have friends that have gone through some of the best business education programs in the world, and they still feel like imposters. Going to, Harvard Business School, Wharton Business School, working for venture capitalists, et cetera. So if they're feeling imposter syndrome, what do you think that means for those of us that may not be the most educated, et cetera? And what I have found is that by reading and embracing a self-taught leadership style, learning style, it combats imposter syndrome. And I'm an autodidact, and it allows me to feel comfortable talking about issues, whether socially, whether business related, that I might not necessarily have the most expertise in, but how hard is it to pick up a couple of books, listen to some podcasts, feel like you're well versed on it to be able to speak about it. And that's kind of what I've done. And so if you look around my apartment, I got books for days. And Andrew, I'll probably reread your book. This is one book, Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, listen on Audible, end up buying it. So I'll listen to it. If it's really good, I feel like I need to revisit this thing. I'll purchase it, right? And I'll buy it. And one of the things I'll tell you is that we should reread books. If you're an entrepreneur, reread books, because you will get more out of a book at a different stage. So like when I first met Andrew, one of the books he told me was the 1-page marketing plan and how to win friends and influence people. I go back and read those books, I'm in a completely different space now. So a lot of that stuff makes more sense. And so one of the things I'm doing in terms of a knowledge worker, right? Because I think that's my most asset, right? Like if you don't have a lot of capital to throw in a company, you know, the most important asset you have is this brain. How do we leverage our knowledge? And so what I found is by rereading books, writing about what I'm reading, capturing it in some kind of way, whether on a podcast or in a blog post or something, I'm more educated. I know that material a lot better. And it just gives you this level of like strength when you speak about this stuff because, yeah, you cannot come from an MBA background. You cannot have this and that, but pretty powerful when you've read 50 books on the subject and you know it like the back of your hand. And you've seen the pattern recognition over and over. And so that's my recommendation on like a reading habit, a knowledge habit, 20 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day if you read, right? Figure out a way not just to read the information, but see if you can capture it. I force you to explain it or teach it to somebody else. And listen to podcasts. Listen to my podcast, Confessions of a Native Son, The Transition. There's a lot of other podcasts out there. But anytime I find myself on the move or a walk or something, or maybe I just want to go drink coffee, I'll just put on a podcast.
Great. No, that's great insight. So, just a little bit at a time and having, a system or a process that you follow. So, we talked about, some of those which are key things. And, learning has been really big for you. But, another thing that is important for entrepreneurs is really overcoming challenges. And I know you've had some, pretty major challenges. What would you say are some of your biggest challenges and what helped you to be able to overcome them?
I definitely think the biggest challenge was when COVID hit, and it's funny because I think about it now, right? Like I'm in a lot better space, like mentally, financially, et cetera. But, and me and Andrew were talking about before this, we went live is you have this belief that when you get to X, it's going to solve all your problems. I.e. you get this amount of money, you get this deal, you get this whatever. But I got a secret for y'all. You're going to be the same person. And when you get there, your problems are just going to be different. You're going to have different problems. You're going to have new headaches. So, the excitement phase of launching something, you really ain't got traction yet, but the energy's still there because it's early. That might be some of the happiest time in your life. Then you're in it. You're in the trenches. You're in the fight. You got way more money. It's not hopes and dreams anymore, but you're just kind of, you're off, right? I'll tell you, when the pandemic hit and that everything shut down for me, when they canceled NBA, I was like, that's the end of my business model. But thankfully, I had joined a business cohort called the Lion's Pride. I got a business coach again, Bill Watkins, and the guy that does my apparel, a guy named Mike Nemeth, he brought me into the group and he called me and was checking on me because he knew, with Ironbound and everything, he was just worried. He picked me up off the canvas, gave me a moto speech, and I got up and I started recording videos in my 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Newark. And all of a sudden, my clients start coming back online. I didn't recover all my revenue, but I got about, 50, 75% better than most people out here. People were filing for unemployment. So I was in a good space. But what I learned was the importance of having accountability, especially as an entrepreneur. I try to tell people now, like, I will never launch a venture again without having some form of business coaching. It's just too hard. I already know that I don't want to have business partners. It's not my personality type. And I've just seen things go south with so many people. And so for me, right, I definitely think I like this kind of not solopreneur lifestyle, but maybe a small team, 1 to 5 people, kind of maximize profit, maximize culture, projects that fill us up. But I will also have a business coach because when things get hard and being a leader, you don't really feel like you have a lot of people to go to. And thankfully, because I had a coach and I had a cohort model, I was leaning into my cohort during the pandemic, and we all came out of it pretty strong. And so that's what I'll say is you got to get some accountability. And you think you can't afford this stuff, you'll tell yourself it's a mental model. You'll tell yourself, you can't afford a business coach, whatever. What I tell people is that it's ironic. And again, this is me learning too. As a national boxer, I can tell you I would never train to compete in a national championship of anything without having a coach in my corner. And it's interesting that one of the most important things we do is start a business because we're trying to secure our financial future, the future of our families. We're investing our livelihoods into these things. Yet we don't have enough wherewithal. We're not taught to think and value coaching. It's like we want to go at it by ourselves. And so that was the thing I will always have, is some form of business coaching.
No, that's a great point, because as a business owner, a lot of times you don't really have people who understand the perspective and really understand what you're going through. So yeah, I mean, definitely business coaching. I'm not against it. I'm for it as well, but not just because I'm a coach, but because it works. And, one thing that you talked about was accountability. And, part of the accountability is having a plan, a business plan. It's amazing how many business owners don't really have a plan. And then it's very difficult to keep yourself accountable and to know whether you're, achieving your goals. So, definitely always a big fan of business planning and work with people on their strategies and business and writing that down, really thinking it through and having, goals, smart goals, so that you can tell how you're moving towards your business and you can easily see and measure where how things are going and whether you need to make some changes. So that's key. What I want to do is we're going to take a break in it for a second, but when we come back, I want to talk with Mike more about marketing and selling, because at the end of the day, that's your most important job as a business owner. And that's something that you've been able to work through and figure out, but not only that, work through with your clients. And, want to just dig into your model as well and really talk to people about how they can think about marketing and selling and really, building on their business in a similar way as you have. So let's take a break for a minute. Want to just share a little bit about my book, Running Your Small Business Like a Pro, and then we'll come back and talk to Mike Steadman a little bit more.
Growing revenue, increasing profitability, and obtaining financing are the results of running your small business like a pro.
This is really the path to achieving the success that most entrepreneurs and business owners are looking to achieve. But it's a path where most people get stuck between step one and step two. Businesses close every day because their owners were not able to create a successful, sustainable enterprise. If you do not create an enterprise, the only way that you can sell your business successfully is you sell yourself with it.
This book is a common sense guide for learning how to run your small business as a professional enterprise.
You can pick up the book as a new entrepreneur or as a seasoned entrepreneur and get something out of it. It's very educational.
It provides a fundamental understanding of the challenges small businesses face with real-world solutions that drive results.
Life examples of what happens in business with cash flow, handling money, very, very accurate, and they were experiences that I've had.
Structure. If I do a shoot, I know that there are certain steps that I have to take to get me to where I need to go. But when it comes to business, I didn't have the same sense of what needed to be done. Andrew helped me see systems, the steps we take to grow your business. So he's helped systematize it.
I worked with a client who was looking to retire and sell his business and expected to get over $500,000 for it. However, when I assessed the business and looked to figure out what the value was, it was less than $100,000. Why was this? Because he didn't create an enterprise. The business was centered around him, and without him, there wasn't a business. This book helps you to understand how to create an enterprise where it can run successfully without you.
Get your copy today. Andrew Frazier's new book online at www.runningyoursmallbusinesslikeapro.com. Also available on Amazon.
Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. Here with Mike Steadman and talking about Man on the Mission, really on a mission to be successful in his business, and you as business owners, you need to be on a mission too. You have your own personal mission, and really, how do you successfully move forward with that? So we're going to talk a little bit about marketing. Just shared a little bit about my book. Actually, Mike, you may not know either, but I recently completed a workbook that goes along with it. So it's another tool to really learn and understand a lot of the concepts there. So definitely that. So we're talking about marketing and really how do you market and sell effectively as a business owner, and how do you do it, and how do you help other people do it? What are the keys?
So I really lean heavily on branding, right? And I came up with a marketing and branding framework called dog whistle branding. So I want to think about your business or your brand, whether it's me at IRONBOUND Boxing or you, Andrew, at SBP Pro, University, or your book or whatever. That brand, your brand is a whistle. And every time you blow on it, whether you're running an ad or you're posting something or you're doing a podcast, whatever, that's going to somebody. And who are you trying to attract? Whose attention are you trying to get? That's your whistle. It's your brand. But one of the things that a lot of us don't do, or what I learned that was like game changer for me, was how can we leverage our branding for marketing? There's like all these different frameworks out there. You got Don Miller's, building a story brand, which is great. There's Vern Harnish's, one-page strategic plan. There's all this other stuff out there. But what it comes down to is, what do you want to be known for? And what do people know you for? And how do we create some form of alignment? And then more importantly, how do we create some alignment that goes directly to the people we want to work with, both in our business and as clients? And so I think one of the things that I did when I first launched IRONBOUND, I just did the branding exercise. Why am I doing this? What is our core purpose? I wanted to give brands a voice they could be proud of. Lean into our core values. Don't be afraid to start ugly. Protect your asset. Lift as we climb. Start to think through our bold beliefs. We believe that audio is the future of publishing. We believe that there are no rules in audio, and really got all this kind of stuff dialed in. And when you start to know who you are and what you stand for, right, that is an asset that you can leverage for marketing. And what I have found is getting super clear and intentional about your brand, right? Then creating some form of whistle to share the word, posting on social media, that's a whistle. Doing a podcast, that's a whistle. Shooting a video series, that's a whistle. And then also planting your brand flag into the ground, saying this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and this is why you should work with us. And polarizing to the point that you turn off some people. They're like, oh, that's not what I'm interested in. But the thing is, you want to plant your brand flag, and you want to own a niche, something that is unique. You have an unfair advantage in. Like me, I have an unfair advantage in the veteran space because I've just been so active in the veteran entrepreneurial ecosystem. I've done keynotes. I've won a major grant from a major institution, all these different things. That's an unfair advantage I can lean into. And so as I started thinking about my perfect customer, who is it that understands my language? So when I say I was a Marine, who gets that? When I say Naval Academy, who gets that? And so just really understanding how to leverage your brand and not just having like those core values and all that stuff that we do. We all do the exercises, but what do we do with it? We just kind of have it internally. It's on the walls of our office. Maybe it's on some internal documents. But in this age of all this noise where everyone is trying to sell to us all day, every day on LinkedIn, on other social media channels, what are you using to stand out from the crowd? And what I've found is it's your brand, that core values, that bold belief, that stuff that resonates with people. And I try to tell people, like, don't just have that, internally for your team. Put it on externally market, on your website, on your proposals, all this kind of stuff. Make sure that anybody who touches your brand knows who you are and what you stand for.
Great point. I mean, definitely, you hear about all these newfangled ways to do stuff, but at the end of the day, it's about getting back to basics. And there's certain business best practices that always work. And there's different tools out there and different ways to employ them. But like you said earlier, at the end of the day, you are your brand. So you're a representation of it, and it has to be, you have to live it. It has to be consistent. And, really being able to communicate it internally and externally. So definitely great point. So, with your business, when you're thinking about branding, like for your podcasts, what do you have as your value proposition? And, if someone says, why should we hire you? What is it that you say, and how did you come up with that?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is there's a red ocean. I saw a red ocean in podcasting, right? Everybody wants to launch wants to launch a podcast, think they're going to get all these listeners, then run ads and monetize it that way. I was like, that's red ocean, sharks in the water. There's no way I can compete with the Gimlet Media, the big brands, the Spotifys of the world, all that kind of stuff, right? What I can do is I can compete on service, and I can also compete on the way in which we approach podcasting. And so I looked at the landscape and I figured there was a better model for podcasting, which is a lot of business leaders, particularly veteran business leaders that are active in their community, have a family, have all this different stuff. They don't necessarily want to commit to sitting down and recording a show week over week, right? It's one thing once you launch it, but now I've got to commit to this thing. And the idea of a podcast sounds like one other thing that's so daunting now that they got to commit to. And so what I said was, an album is good 10, 20, 30 years later. Why not a podcast? So a platinum album is good 10, 20, 30 years later. Why not a podcast? And I was like, what if we start treating podcasts like platinum albums? Creating 5, 10, 15 episode podcast series that a client can use to get their thoughts out, use it for marketing, branding, whatever angle they want, and then put that out in the universe and then just recycle it over and over and over again. Or, maybe they want to change a different subject. Maybe they want to do an album on this topic. They want to do an album on that. And so that was the value proposition I came up with. Initially, I was targeting incubators and accelerators because, right in the middle of the pandemic, people were sick of Zoom classes. They're sick of Zoom education. And I thought, why are business schools and accelerators that have coaches, et cetera, saying the same questions over and over again, answering the same questions over and over again? My value prop, put it on a podcast, create a 10, 15 episode series, how to launch a business, developing your go-to-market strategy, building a brand, et cetera. Let's put it on podcast. I put that into 3 different packages, bronze, silver, and platinum, and I productized it, and I went on and sold. And that's how I built IRONBOUND Media.
That's great. Definitely, with what you're doing, the good thing is, first you looked at your competition to see, and that helped you to be able to figure out your niche. Where could you make a difference? And, a lot of times you really want a smaller niche rather than a larger, and you want to be as focused as possible. So, really being able to do that makes a lot of sense. And, like how you were able to think that through. So now with what you're doing in terms of marketing and selling, you said you productized it. What does it mean to productize something? Especially a service, how do you turn that into a product?
I think sometimes people can get offended when people, the business people with experience, they say it's just a widget. You're like, oh, I got this great business product I'm making, blah, blah, blah. And the business person looks like it as a widget. He doesn't care about all the features. He doesn't care about any stuff. How much are we selling this for? How much are people willing to pay it for? And one of the things I found is that, for services, you can try to offer this. You can offer this menu of services. But when you package it and create it like a product, say, let's say it's 5, 10, 15K. You got 3 different packages. Or maybe you do 10, 20, 30K. Now it's a lot easier for you to sell it because you can sell a 10K package. And so if you sell 5 10K packages, that's $50,000. And so just trying to simplify the process. And then you said something that was really important, Andrew, and I think it's true, is we all have these aspirational companies we want to work with, right? The giant corporations of the world, the ones that we can brag to our friends about. I'm being honest, a small business owner, they don't always make the best clients. You got to deal with in the military, we say actuals talk to actuals. So if I'm on your ship, Andrew, and I say, talk to me, I want to talk to your commander, I'm not going to talk to the seaman. They're going to walk me in and talk to, a lieutenant commander or whoever's in charge of the ship, commander, whatever. Small business is actuals talking to actuals, I feel like personally. And that's very hard to do at a corporate level where there's all this other stuff kind of going on. Maybe you have some relationship with someone because you went to business school with them or something. But for like normal human beings in the world, right? Business is fueled just purely by like those relationships that we talked about. And I have found that I enjoy talking to actuals that understand the value that they're like, I understand what it means when someone appreciates the value that they're spending on their money, that they're committed to not just, putting out a bad product or service, that they understand that like, hey, I don't have just money to toss around, et cetera. And I just found that I enjoy working with small business owners, and they're a lot easier. And the other thing too that I'll tell y'all is, like Andrew said, is go after the smallest market that you can hit a home run in. Because at the end of the day, you need to get on base first. You hit some base hits, start getting on base, and then you can expand into a broader market. But business is so much more easier. Everybody tells you this, but it's like, we don't want to believe it. But just find a niche that you could own that's easy. When I was doing my corporate boxing business, my niche that worked out really well was car dealerships. Because I was calling up I got a client to pay us $1,000 a month to come in and teach $1,000 a week for a boxing class. Because what they had was they had all these, they commissioned sales force, a lot of overweight people, just in the car industry, general, like a lot of companies not necessarily targeting them for wellness, and they're working on commission. And so the dealers basically had a lot of money to kind of keep people motivated, keep them happy. So they would do like Christmas parties and ice cream parties and all this kind of stuff. Well, they paid us to come in and teach boxing classes. Once I figured out that was a niche, I started calling up car dealerships and say, hey, have you ever thought about, we offer boxing classes to car dealerships. And I would call up and I'll say, can I speak to the general manager, please? Because I knew who had the authority to make that decision. And so then it was just a lot easier. Then the pandemic hit, unfortunately. But that's what I think of, when I think about your go-to-market, right? Like find these places that you have a unique perspective in, that you can add value to it, and you'll survive. You'll not only survive, but you'll thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And definitely you have to be flexible. Like you learn things that, your market may end up being a little different than you originally thought it was. And as a small business owner, you don't need to own a whole market. Sometimes, you look and you're like, oh, I want to market to 1,000 people or 1 million people. But the first question you should ask yourself is, well, how many customers do I really need? And depending on your business, you might need 10 customers, 20, 50, 100, whatever. But that should give you some insights into what your target market should be. If you can be successful on 10 customers a month, then you don't need to market to 1,000 customers a month. You got to market to the right 20. Finding that niche of who's most likely to buy from you is key.
I think also, not even just thinking about like who's going to buy from you, but the also thing is you got to ask yourself, like, I am learning this. So like I'm sharing knowledge, I'm learning. There are a lot of vanity metrics out there that sounds good. Like it sounds good to tell people, oh yeah, I got this company, I got this client. Tell me about you. Come on, we got 150 employees, whatever. Like for us, that's impressive, right? We're like, man, that's what we dream of. But maybe he doesn't have the same freedom you do. Maybe they can't go to the coffee shop and sit and write, for 30 minutes every morning, sipping a cup of coffee, just relaxing, because they got to manage all these other things and all these other people. And so, be hesitant of the vanity metrics out there that we're doing for other people, so other people say we're successful, versus looking at the vanity metrics or looking at your own core purpose and your core values. Like, why am I doing this? What kind of lifestyle do I want to live? Am I being intentional? Because when it gets tough, and it will be tough, you need a base and remind yourself like why you're doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, everybody has their own mission, but, it's a journey. And that's the great part about entrepreneurship and business ownership. So we've covered a whole bunch of things this evening. And, as I mentioned, Mike, time really goes fast because we're approaching the 9 o'clock time frame. But what I want to do before we close out is really take a second and distill a couple things that you want people to take away from this evening, and things that they can put to work immediately within their business, because that's what it's all about, learning things that can help you to be more successful. So you've covered a lot. What would you say are a couple of the key things that people should be taking away from what we talked about today?
I think number one is find a business coach. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. You got to put on your credit card, whatever, lean into it. But you want somebody there with the knowledge, skills, and experiences to help you navigate this process we call, life and business. And find someone that doesn't just care about your business. Find someone that cares about your life as well. Make sure that you have some form of accountability, whether it's a business coach, whether it's a cohort that you're signed up with, you're doing a free incubator program or your paid incubator or something. Find some group accountability. Really lean into your brand. Really think about how you're positioning your brand into the world. How do people speak about it when you're not in the room? And take the time to really dial in and hone your brand. And think of it like a dog whistle, you start blowing on it, marketing, branding, etc. Who are you trying to draw in? And then lastly, I would say is, just be intentional about the type of entrepreneur you want to be. Don't follow the vanity metrics, right? At the end of the day, who are you doing this to make proud? Is it your family? Is it your community? Is it you? Where can you make the most impact? And what fills you up? And if you're a craftsman like me, like you enjoy figuring out the problems and solving it, like, maybe I enjoy interviewing people and learning about their businesses and talking entrepreneurship. That's a craftsman, right? Maybe you don't enjoy, the other side of like growing and scaling, et cetera. It's okay. Just figure out a lifestyle and a brand, figure out a way to do what you love, get paid to do it, that allows you to grow, that allows you to support your family, and then have fun, because life is too short to not enjoy, the work that we're spending our time with, because, you can look back and, realize you spend your entire life doing something you hate. And I don't think that's good for you. And I don't think that's good for the universe, because it's a missed opportunity. So, really just be intentional. And if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Follow me on my social media at Iron Mike Steadman, Instagram, Iron Mike Steadman, LinkedIn. But I'm just happy to know Andrew. I'm happy to help.
Okay, great, Mike. Thanks for taking time to join us this evening. Hang out for a minute. We're going to close out, but definitely Mike Steadman. Thanks. Connect with him. He's doing great things. You can support his efforts with the IRONBOUND Boxing, helping young people to really get access to opportunities for being successful in what they're doing, as well as look for what he's doing from a podcast and really helping businesses as well. So thanks again, Mike, and great having you on. We'll have to have you on further, and look forward to chatting with you a little bit more. So as we close out today, great session with Mike Steadman. Each week we have someone great on to talk with about different areas and different topics in terms of business. And just to give you a quick heads up about what we have coming next week. Next week we have Jack Killian, and he's the CEO of Street Smart Entrepreneurs. And really, he's done a lot of great things in his career. But, one thing that he's found is that networking is critical. We talked about relationships being very important, and, really focusing on networking all the time, everywhere, and with everybody. And that's also the name of his book. So next Tuesday, Leadership Live at 8:05, talking small business, and look forward to joining you again there. So thanks again. And, always remember that the more you know, the faster you grow. Take care and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.